The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I am your host, Grant Levac, and if you found this channel intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, namely UFOs, UAP, and you crave to know what's real and what is not. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. It's been a little bit over a month, so I know it's been a bit of a while in between drinks, but want to have a shout out to a few folks. Polly, great to see you in the chat as always, my friend, along with Short Order Cook. Great to see you here. Jimmy never misses a show, so great to see you here, my friend. Thanks for tuning in on your Thursday night. Jojo Diamonds, welcome. Thanks for tuning in. We've got George in the house. Good to see you, George. Bex is here as well. Thanks for tuning in, Bex. And I think that's pretty much Keith is tuning in from X. So great to see you, Keith. Thanks for tuning in for this episode. And always good to see some regular faces in the chat. So as always, feel free to opine, ask questions, add your comments, have your own discussions in the chat. I always am thrilled to see the amount of engagement in the chat. So certainly welcome any sidebar conversations that you want to have as we're going through, and throw any comments or questions. I'll try and come to them along the way. So tonight is all about Westall. Which similar to last month, which was pretty much all about Westall. This is really a special episode of the Unexplained Rundown to really celebrate and commemorate 60 years, the 60th anniversary of Westall, and really review some of the events that took place over the course of this month, early in the month, to formally commemorate the Westall flying saucer incident, as well as review some of the press coverage that Westall has gotten, which is relatively extensive, I'm pleased to report, over the course of this month and late last month. So, but before we jump into that, folks, if you're new to the channel and you're interested to see more of this kind of content, please do me a big favor and subscribe to the channel. Most folks that tune in aren't subscribers, so if you do enjoy the content, please do subscribe. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine, but please consider giving it a good old like and share. That certainly goes a long way. If you like to get your podcast on Spotify, find us there under the Unexplained Rundown. Please give us a review if you like us on Spotify. And if you want to support the channel and see it continue to grow, we are getting an increased number of Patreon and YouTube members, which goes a long way to help support the channel and see some of the outgoings assisted with, some of the ongoing costs that are associated with doing a live stream, because those that have done one themselves, a podcast, know that it ain't cheap. So if you are interested to support the show for a couple of gold coins a month, check out the membership options in the show notes below. And obviously, great thank you to all of the very generous Patreon members and YouTube members already that support the channel. I greatly appreciate your ongoing patronage and support. So let's dive in, folks, to this evening's content, I'm going to share my screen. I've got a couple of slides on the deck to show you. So we're really talking about the 60th anniversary special episode to commemorate the Westall UFO mystery, and again, review some of the events that took place earlier this month and review some of the press coverage as well. So let's start with, before we kind of dive into the events, not everyone may be aware of this, but late last month, or actually a few days after the live stream that I did last month, I think it was on the 19th of March, a few days after, I had the opportunity to jump into a space that was being hosted by Hollywood, a great space, and her guest was James Fox, none other than James Fox. And I took the opportunity to ask James a question about the Westall incident leading up to the 60th anniversary earlier this month on the 6th of April, 1966. So here is the question that I had for James, and some of you just might find his comments interesting because he doesn't opine on Westall all that frequently. So this is James Fox in a space on X on the 21st of March.
Grant. Hi, Bud. Do you have a question for James?
Holly, great space. It's thanks so much for hosting, and James, it's a pleasure to be able to ask you a question. I just wanted to switch gears for a bit, and you know, folks down under, I'm in Australia, know that next month marks the 60th anniversary of the Westall case, which you've helped bring to light and done an incredible amount of research on, and you highlighted in the phenomenon of 2020. You know, what's so frustrating for researchers, not just yourself, but you know, Shane Ryan, who's done a lot of the lead groundwork in Australia, Keith Basterfield, Bill Chalker, Ross Coulthart, myself, and others. It's so frustrating that there's never been any official explanation or any documentary evidence that's been provided by the Australian government or Department of Defence to date for what was observed in the sky above Westall High School on the 6th of April 1966. And that's no explanation for why there was a rapid military response on the day, no explanation for witness intimidation, no explanation for confiscation of evidence. And only recently, the Minister for Defence here in Australia, Richard Marles, hasn't even bothered to respond to a formal petition that secured 831 signatures calling on the government to launch an independent inquiry and provide answers to the witnesses that have lived with this for 60 years. So given your extensive research on Westall and where the landscape of the disclosure movement is in 2026, do you ever think we'll get some answers for what occurred on the 6th of April 1966? Do you think the Australian government will be transparent and provide answers and give the witnesses some closure 60 years on?
Well, a great question and great case, by the way. And Shane Ryan and James Rigney and yourself and Bill Chalker. I mean, I tip my hat to all of you. It's funny, we were putting that segment in the phenomenon, and we were like, no, hang on a second. April 6th, they had the congressional hearing, and we kind of like calculated out. We're like, gosh, I think the last congressional hearing was happening or just ending when they were walking probably out of the halls of Congress from, you know, this congressional hearing in 1966. A UFO on the other side of the world was landing at a school or just outside a school in Westall, you know, and we kind of thought, well, that's extraordinary. And then when I met with James Kimmel, who allegedly took that Polaroid photograph of something, I think it was either 2 days earlier. I think it was 2 days earlier, or perhaps 2 days later, but I think it was 2 days earlier. And he said to me, you know, the last chap that was here, you know, that was 1966. And his name was James as well. I was like, wow, who is that? He goes, I think his name was Dr. James McDonald. I was like, that's the last guy you talked to from America? He goes, yeah, I think so. But they came to his house, and mate, I'm trying to remember if they were American. That James McDonald was clearly an atmospheric physicist. He was clearly American, no question about it. Whether he was investigating in an official capacity, probably not, don't know. But I believe there were either Americans or a contingent of Americans showing James Kibble photographs of other incidents that were quite similar to the photograph that he had taken. And they didn't let him keep those photographs. But that is a very good point. I will bring it up with members of the task force in the United States and tell them they should dig into that case, because we've got a date and location. So that's a brilliant idea. And I will definitely ask them to reach out on that case as well.
Thanks, James. And I encourage everyone to give Grant a follow. He's a phenomenal researcher from down under. Give Grant a follow. He's doing some great work down there.
So it was it was a little bit I guess disappointing is not the right word, but James, I love James. We went off on a kind of a bit of a tangent there and didn't really address the question that I was asking, but still got some interesting information from James, particularly at the end there when he said he was going to potentially raise it with Congress. Now, what was, I guess, a little bit of a fork in the road or a pivot in James' response there was he kind of went straight to the Baldwin UFO incident, which actually happened 4 days earlier on the 2nd of April, 1966. Where that photograph of the UFO kind of on its side, Polaroid photo that James featured in the phenomenon is shown. And then 4 days after, on the 6th of April, 1966, was the Westall incident. So I've always deliberately kept Westall and the Baldwin UFO incident separate because, and as I've mentioned to George and Bill, really the only things that connect the Baldwin UFO case of the 2nd of April 1966 with the Westall case of the 6th of April 1966 is proximity, approximately separated by 15 kilometers, 10 to 15 Ks. The fact that it was there was obviously testimony from witnesses at Westall that whatever the object was, it kind of tilted on its side and off it went. That is depicted in the image that we see. Now, I can't speak to the veracity of that image, but it's certainly been hotly debated. And the other connection or loose connection, I guess, you've got proximity, you've got the positioning of the craft, and the third. What was the third? I was only talking about it the other day. It escapes me. Was the fact that it was separated only by a few days, by 4 days. Now, beyond that, there isn't any direct link or connection that we can make to the Westall case. So, didn't really get the answer that I was hoping for from James there, specifically pertaining to the Westall case. But hey, if there's an opportunity for him to bring it up with members of the UAP task force, Anna Paulina Luna, Representative Burchett, and it piques their interest potentially in the Westall case and maybe the Baldwin UFO case. I think that's a positive thing. So, but it was always good to hear from James and obviously get his thoughts, because he did a lot of research, including Westall, in the phenomenon, which he released in 2020, which I believe is publicly available on YouTube. So just interesting soundbite that I wanted to play for you. For those of you that haven't heard it, wanted to play that. But let's now jump forward. That was on the 21st of March. On the 4th of April, so 2 days before the 60th anniversary of the Westall case, again, that was the 6th of April of this year, 2 days earlier on the 4th, there was a witness reunion event organized by a number of the primary witnesses at the Grange, the wooded area that's approximately a kilometer or so south of Westall, the high school. And each year the witnesses kind of gather, they reunite at this location to share their memories, their recollections, but also take questions from the general public. And what was so incredibly extraordinary about this year's Westall Witnesses Reunion event, obviously celebrating 60th anniversary, it was an absolutely massive turnout. And a lot of folks that are in the chat were there. George was there, Jimmy was there, James Rigney was there, Bex was there, Steve. There were so many folks that I ended up having a chat to, that I engaged with online. So it was a good opportunity just to catch up with folks that I know, but also an opportunity to meet folks that I wasn't in contact with previously. And let me show you a brief montage that I put together. I just took a couple of clips on my phone that day just to kind of capture the the feel of the event, because it was a really it was a really cool day. It was an opportunity for witnesses to obviously share their recollections with each other, members of the public, new faces, familiar faces. And there was a face there that you'll all recognize. So let me play this clip for you to give you a sense as to what happened at the reunion event on the 4th of April.
This is the guy that found the memo. I'm asking everybody this. Joy, stay here for this. Okay. 60 years on. Have any of you got any dates?
No way.
Still pretty sure about
Know
what
what
you
I saw, and I will never forget. No, it's in the head, in the brain. Absolutely, never change.
You know, the thing I find most fascinating is that for all of you, I'm not saying it's the most important event in your life, but it's one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's given us a connection, you know. I mean, that's the lovely part. We've all moved. That's right. But we're all connected, and we're connected because of what happened to us that day. Yeah. And nobody can ever take that away from us.
No, absolutely.
And I don't, you know. Yeah, it's just.
But the debunkers say all you saw was a weather bird.
Oh,
I mean, you're deluded. You're all tinfoil hat nutters, all of you. I'm sorry. All of you are tinfoil hat nutters.
So there you go. So that was just a little montage that I put together, just with some backing music, and obviously then capturing the audio from Ross and some of the witnesses there. You can see how many people were in attendance, and the witnesses and Ross were just getting swamped with photographs and questions. So Ross was there obviously with a film crew from the 7 Network. I understand that the 7 Network is doing a feature on not just Westall, but Ross, his journey from investigative journalist on a whole range of topics to basically becoming the leading investigative journalist on the UAP topic. So it was a great day out. Again, great opportunity for members of the public to learn from the witnesses. I think from talking with folks, and correct me if I'm wrong, George, you would know, it was one of the biggest turnouts, if not the biggest turnout, for a Westall Witness reunion event that they've had to date. So it was wonderful to see so many so many of the witnesses there, some that I hadn't had an opportunity to speak with previously. So spent some time talking with them, and obviously great to see Ross taking some questions from folks as well. I included a little clip there of Ross commenting. He was pointing to James Rigney, basically saying that this is the man that released or got the memo released. He was referring to the Wilson Davis notes, as James Rigney was heavily involved in that. So yes, George comments, yes, the biggest turnout to date, which is wonderful. So it was a truly great day. If you have an opportunity to get along to a future Westall Witness reunion event, they run it on an annual basis on or around the 6th of April each year. So I really enjoyed it. It was the 3rd time that I've had a chance to go down there and get to see folks. So it was a really good day out. great to see you, Mark. Thanks for tuning in. And we had it was great to see. We had who tuned in. Ryan Sprague of Somewhere in the Skies tuned in not long ago. So welcome, my friend, and great to see the gang over at the Hidden Underbelly. I'll be talking about them in a short while. So stay tuned. Let's see. Yes, apologies about the ads there, TARDIS. I think I don't seem to have a whole lot of control over when they play during the live stream. So apologies if it's a bit frustration there. Beck's so cool. Got to asking a question referring to James Fox. Great to see Anthony from Encounters Down Under. Thanks for tuning in, my friend. And I think that's, I'll come to some of the other comments as we go through. What's with the music? Fair call. Again, it's just putting a few clips together. A little bit boring having just atmospheric sound of just background chatter and wind blowing through the trees. So I thought it'd be a little bit less boring putting a bit of background music to it. So excellent. Well, let's move away from the Westall Witnesses reunion event that was on the 4th of April, and I now want to segue to some press coverage that Westall got the day prior to the 60th anniversary. So on the 5th of April, the 10 network, so 10 News, ran what I thought was a well-done segment on the Westall case, and they had an opportunity to interview some of the primary witnesses. So let me play this clip for you. I had posted it to X, so it was positive to see that one of the legacy news outlets, Channel 10, was featuring Westall in their evening news. So let me play this for you now.
Sightings involve one lone eyewitness making claims so unbelievable it's easy to be sceptical. But imagine 140 witnesses, all with consistent descriptions, who haven't changed their stories for decades. Would you believe them then?
60 years ago, that happened at a Victorian school, and all these years later, the now adult witnesses want answers and an acknowledgement that what they saw was real.
I stood there absolutely transfixed and saw the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, I know what I saw. I don't expect them to believe me, because when it happened, I didn't believe what I was seeing because it wasn't possible.
My girlfriend and I sat on the fence, climbed up the fence and just sat there and cried. We thought it was the end of the world.
It's known as Australia's Roswell, April 6, 1966. The day one of the largest mass UFO sightings in history took place at a Victorian school.
What I saw 60 years ago was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life.
Joy Clark was one of more than 100 students and teachers who saw 3 unidentifiable objects in the sky.
They were shaped circular with a hump in the middle, the row of lights around the bottom. And they were silvery and huge.
Authorities responded en masse to the multiple reports, initially claiming the kids had seen a weather balloon.
Do you believe it was a weather balloon?
No way, no. N-O. Why would you have had the Army, the Air Force, the men in dark suits, the police rock up for a weather balloon and stay there, and they were coming and going all day?
All these years later, what do you think they were?
Well, whatever they were like flying saucers. None of the aircraft that are around today look like them.
And 60 years on, you have no doubt.
Some things after 60 years are still as vivid as that day. Honestly, it was broad daylight. We're talking 10:30 in the morning.
Despite their stories remaining consistent for 6 decades,
our stories are all the same.
Joy and her fellow witnesses have spent their lives facing doubt and ridicule.
Oh, I've had people say to me, what drugs were you on and how drunk were you? And, all you kids, you've all got together and made up this big story and blah, blah, blah. Well, were you there? And of course the answer's no. But I was, and so were all those other people, and we know what we saw.
To this day, it remains the largest mass UFO sighting in Australian history, yet there's been no formal public investigation or explanation into what happened at Westall 60 years ago.
All we want is verification. We want an answer. And we want someone who is in the know and has probably got documents somewhere to just come forward and say that what happened that day happened that day.
Terry Peck was also at Westall High School that day, and she joins us now. Thanks for joining us, Terry. What did you see?
Right in front of me, probably about 10 metres away, I saw this object just hovering slightly above the ground. It appeared to be a big silver disc type of object with a bit of a hump in the middle. There were purple lights all around the bottom of it, and I could feel a little bit of heat radiating from it. I could also hear a low buzz, and I just stood there sort of taking it in and looking at it in shock and quite excited. And then it just took off very slowly off the ground to about 15 metres, 20 metres high, and then turned on its side and just shot straight up in the air, faster than the speed of light. It was so fast. And then I could see two specks up in the sky, which were the other two. There were 3 craft altogether over the school. And I saw it join them, and then they just disappeared into thin air. And then we had assemblies where we were all told not to talk about what we'd seen, that it was nothing. We were told it was a weather balloon, all these weird stories, and it was no weather balloon, believe me.
Well, what do you think it was?
Look, I'm pretty convinced that it was something from somewhere else. I mean, we just don't have anything that can move at those speeds, so I'm assuming that it was from another galaxy, planet, whatever. And look, I didn't see any windows in it. I didn't see anybody inside. All I saw were all the purpley blue lights around the bottom of it. There were some seams in the craft, but I don't know. I think in my head it came from somewhere else.
Terry, that is quite a sight. You were just 11 when this happened. In the 60 years since, has your recollection changed at all?
No, look, it hasn't really. I mean, look, they tried to tell us it was some sort of an American experiment as well, but I don't really believe that, because in all these years there's been nothing that's come forth that's could move that fast or disappeared. They just could move all over the place really quickly. So I don't think there's anything around now that could even do that.
Terry, what I find most compelling is that so many people saw these objects, 140 people. All of you had the same story, and all of you have stuck to it for 6 decades. You were kids then, but you're adults now. It would have been hard for you to make all of this up and stick to it.
Oh, that's right. I mean, I didn't talk about it for many years. You know, I've got a daughter and she didn't even know about it until probably the last 20 years, because you didn't talk about things like that back then, you know, for fear of being ridiculed or whatever. But I think now, with the Freedom of Information Acts and that being, you know, released in America, and lots of Air Force pilots and reputable people have seen these things, and I think now there's a lot more interest in it now, and a lot more believe that there is something else than years ago. And I think it would have created a lot of fear amongst people years ago to know that something like that has happened. And I think that's why they covered it up, to be honest. I mean, things went missing, you know, tapes were taken out of canisters from TV stations, and it was a mass cover-up because I think they were frightened of the reaction of the public at the time.
So you believe there's been a cover-up. The old weather balloon is an instant red flag there. And we just heard from fellow student Joy Clark calling for verification for answers. Are you worried that time is running out?
Who knows? That's right. They might be banking on that, everyone going, and it just quietly fades away. I don't know.
Well, we would all like to know what happened. Thank you so much for sharing your experience today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mills, I know you looked into all this. Do you believe them?
Yeah, I do. Just the sheer number of people who said that they saw that, and they were children then. These people have gone on to be doctors, barristers, teachers. They are educated people who don't lie, and they all say that's what they saw that day.
So they say it's mathematically almost impossible that we are alone.
So there you go. So that was what 10 News put out, and I honestly think they did quite a good job. You know, it was refreshing not to see not to hear the X-Files theme being played, or spooky music, or silly remarks and questions being thrown at the guests. And I think the hosts asked some good questions. Again, for us that are invested in the topic of UFOs, UAP, and the Westall case, there really wasn't anything new for us in that. But I think it was a great overall synopsis of the Westall case, and good to hear from obviously Joy and Terry. So I was really quite surprised to see that that coverage come out, and was quite pleased that it came out on the eve of the Westall case too. So some of you may not have seen that. I thought again it was worth sharing, because there were some good questions that are asked during the that segment. So that was on the 4th. So what happened on the actual anniversary of Westall, so the 6th of April 2026, so earlier this month, was to the date the 60th anniversary, and ABC's Australian Story aired a 30-minute episode on the Westall case, which I was privileged to be invited to participate in, as were some of my other fellow researchers, Shane Ryan. Bill Chalker was invited, but unfortunately they did not include Bill's commentary in the actual segment. They got a lot more footage than they ended up using, so I would be thrilled and interested to see some of the other footage that they collected during their filming, but they just didn't use and consolidate it down into 30 minutes. So before I show you a promo clip from Australian Story, and it's readily available for anyone to watch on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, I would certainly encourage you to have a look at it. I've included the link in the show notes below, so if you do want to check it out, feel free. But let me show you, I do want to read you an article that the ABC put out the same day, earlier in the day, so prior to the airing of Australian Story. They put, this is the ABC, this is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the equivalent, Australia's equivalent to, I guess, the BBC. And, historically, the ABC hasn't really covered the UFO topic in great detail. They certainly did a great podcast for their Expanse podcast last year. It was called Uncropped. They did a 5 or 6 part podcast series on the Tully Saucer Nest case, the same year as Westall, only 3 months before Westall, which is interesting. So I want to read you this article because it's very well done. It was by the producer of Australian Story, Rebecca Latham, as well as Lisa Scott. And so I'll read it to you for those that haven't had an opportunity to read it, and obviously so it's captured on the audio version of this live stream. So it starts off with, Tanya Vassie was playing on the school oval when she looked up into the clear autumn sky to see a strange, rounded 2-story disc floating above. The 13-year-old watched transfixed as the object moved through the sky erratically, dashing at speed from one direction to another. Then she ran, yelling, into the school. And this is a photograph of Tanya today. Tanya says, I remember rushing down the corridor, screaming, flying saucer, flying saucer, Tanya tells Australian Story. Children came from everywhere. Teachers came from everywhere. So began one of Australia's most intriguing mysteries, an event so unusual and surrounded by conspiracy theories that it's only been in recent years Tanya has felt comfortable talking about what she swears she saw 60 years ago. And that's a photograph of her as a child. Tanya wasn't the only one to see it. Scores of people watched from the school oval, some in amazement, some in terror, as an unidentified flying object swept across the skies above Westall High School and the adjacent primary school in Melbourne's southeast on April 6, 1966. Some saw up to 3 objects. It remains the biggest mass sighting of a UFO in Australian history. And an image of, from left to right, what Terry Peck, Paul Smith, Joy Clark, and the other gentleman, his name escapes me, unfortunately, but drawings of what they recollect seeing on the day. Was it a case of mass hysteria? Many UFO enthusiasts are convinced it was an extraterrestrial visitation. Others believe the answer to the mystery lies in a more earthbound explanation. Ken Stallard, a former Westall student and retired, and I believe that's Ken in the photograph on the far right there, a former Westall student and retired school principal, believes the object was likely part of a secret military program, but argues that by definition, it was a UFO. I saw what I saw, and so did all my school friends, hundreds of us, he says. It was unidentified, it was flying, and it was clearly an object. Photograph of Richard Saunders of the Australian Skeptics Incorporated. He does not doubt something happened that day. His quote is, "It's just trying to find the most reasonable explanation without jumping to fantasy or the very unlikely event of an alien in a spacecraft," Mr. Saunders says. People would rather jump to a conclusion which is quite far-fetched and be satisfied than simply say, we just don't know. Westall researcher Grant Levac points out some skeptics suggest mass hysteria could be at play. I don't think it's something that can be completely discounted, he says, but in the absence of documentary evidence, I can only go off what the witnesses recall and testify to. And so it's clear they saw something. James Fox, a US filmmaker who directed the 2020 documentary The Phenomenon that focused on UFOs in the US but included Westall, says most sightings can be explained in conventional prosaic terms. But he argues about 10 or 15% remain confounding. Westall is one of them. The significance, James Fox goes on to say, the significance of the Westall case is the fact that there was so many people, the sheer volume of first-hand witnesses saying the same thing 60 years ago as they are today, Mr. Fox says. Not only did so many see the objects, but multiple witnesses report that within 30 minutes, men in uniform arrived at a spot close to the school where some say they saw the craft descend. And then the shutters came down. The school principal assembled the students and told them it was a weather balloon and not to talk about it. Some were ushered into a room where unidentified men told them to not discuss what they'd seen. Today, on the 60th anniversary, witnesses are demanding answers. Many are retired and no longer worried about being ridiculed or jeopardizing their jobs by speaking out. What were the objects? Were they top secret military prototypes? And why aren't there any government records documenting these events? What frustrates me, and I think all of the other pupils, says Tanya, who became a marketing and business manager, is the attempt of having it buried. If it was really nothing of significance, well, let's explain it. I think that's all that everybody wants to know. Please tell us what it was. Saucer-shaped object the size of cars, vivid witness accounts. What a scene it must have been. Scores of kids and teachers standing in the school grounds, all peering skywards, pointing slack-jawed, marveling. Even today, the witness accounts from former students are strikingly consistent. Ken Stallard remembers a flying object that was large, easily visible, circular, silver. Former nurse Marilyn Smith says there were no windows. It was an oval shape about the size of 2 or 3 cars. Joy Clark says it moved at incredible speed and was shiny, metallic, with a dome in the middle. Self-confessed naughty student Terry Peck recalls how she and others vaulted the school fence to race after the saucer-shaped craft as it moved to a nearby area of bush known as the Grange. There was this strange thing that just sitting there, hovering above the ground, quite big, about 1.5 times the size of a large sedan, Terry says. Then she watched as the craft slowly rose into the air. It turned on its side and just went straight up into the air so fast it was almost instantaneous. Left behind, says Terry and multiple other students, was a swirly pattern of yellowed grass, and a lifetime of questions. For Mr. Saunders, the consistency of witness accounts should be treated with caution. The big misconception is that we have good memories. We don't, he says. When people are on the same page, more or less, there's a group. There's a group reinforcement of the common story. This is perfectly natural, but it can be misleading. Curiosity led former teacher and public servant Shane Ryan to seek answers in 2005, and he's been researching ever since. Mr. Ryan learned that 4 days prior to the Westall sighting, engineer James Kibble was in the backyard of his home in the nearby suburb of Baldwin when he saw a flash of light in the sky. Mr. Kibble said he quickly snapped a Polaroid photo of a silver disc in the air. Mr. Ryan acknowledges today that it could be a photo of something more mundane like a bicycle bell or a hubcap. I know what James Kibble told me, he says. I'm just not in a position to know one way or another. Mr. Ryan's detailed research into the Westall sighting has led him to speak with 142 people from the school and surrounding properties who saw the object or objects in the sky, and 197 people who saw the ground marks. 77 witnesses saw both. Every person has a slightly different perspective and a slightly different angle, he says. It's amazing to me that there is so much commonality across the witness testimonies. Paul Smith was 16 at the time and working close by at a market garden. When he stood up to ease his sore back, that's when he saw something in the sky. I didn't believe it because it couldn't be happening, he says. And I thought, no, it's not an aeroplane. It's just sitting above the power lines in the sky. Many told Mr. Ryan that over the years they'd mentioned their close encounter to others, and many times they'd been ridiculed. Witness Joy Clark says people have criticized her. I've had abuse over the years and people calling me crazy. I have one question. Were you there? And they all say no. What have we got to lie about? Being able to tell their story to a non-judgmental listener was cathartic for them, Mr. Ryan says, like a relief valve being opened. One of the people he contacted was Claude Miller, one of the last surviving Westall teachers who missed seeing the UFO because he was having a tea break before starting playground duty. But he saw the aftermath, the frenzy of the kids and teachers, the chaos, the confusion. Claude remembers bumping into his friend, science teacher Andrew Greenwood, as he walked back into the school excited. The first words he said to me, Claude recalls, was something like, "Did you see it? Did you see it?" Andrew told Claude that he'd seen a flying craft that accelerated at unimaginable speeds vertically, disappeared from one spot, turned up in another spot, changed direction, dropped and faded to nothing, then appeared somewhere else. Like others that day on the Oval, Andrew also saw conventional light aircraft in the sky, seemingly interacting with the objects. The school was near Moorabbin Airport. Students were interviewed, then silenced. Later that day, a special assembly was called. School principal Frank Sambleby laid down the law. There was no such thing as flying saucers, he said. They were not to talk about what they saw to anyone. Get on with your studies and forget about it. Some have interpreted this as an attempt to cover up the story. Others, like teacher Claude Miller, say the principal's directive was understandable because no one would have wanted their school to be the center of a UFO sighting. Then some students were taken separately to meet with men they'd never seen before. Tanya was one of them. She recalls the men suggesting she had seen a weather balloon. When they disagreed, they changed their approach, suggesting she should stay quiet. So she did for 50 years. I kept my word to the point where I did not discuss it with my mother, she says. I did not discuss it with anybody. Other kids were bolder. Marilyn and Joy recall walking out of the school that day to see a Channel 9 news team waiting. The two girls and a few boys eagerly recounted the sighting, pointing to the sky in a reenactment. As the interviews were wrapping up, a policeman arrived to tell the journalist to leave. Both girls received detention. Teacher Andrew Greenwood also spoke with the local Dandenong Journal newspaper. It would bring him into the sights of government officials who he claimed threatened him with losing his job if he spoke further. In an interview recorded before Andrew died, he said, I was told that I would be prosecuted and that I had to keep quiet about it. Why did I have to keep quiet? The theories. What was in the sky in 1966? Government secrecy was part of the climate in 1966. The Cold War was on, the space race was in full sprint, Pine Gap was being planned, and Australia was increasingly used as a staging point for military programs spearheaded by the US. The fact that the story seems to have been shut down by somebody would make me think that it's more likely to have been military or government involvement, says witness Ken Stallard. It was also a time of burgeoning sightings of UFOs, a phenomenon that became part of the popular culture when US pilots started reporting encounters after World War II. One theory was that the object could be related to the HIBAL, High Altitude Balloon Project, which measured radioactivity levels in the stratosphere after nuclear tests. The balloons, enormous and silver in color, launched from Mildura, hundreds of kilometers from Melbourne. Some of those balloons got away, Mr. Saunders says. Did it happen that one of those balloons drifted down to Melbourne? It would explain possibly the appearance of government officials at the school. Electronics specialist John Sutcliffe is one of the last remaining members of the Mildura Highball team working in 1966. He has no recollection of anything coming down unexpectedly in Melbourne on the day of the sightings. We went to a great deal of trouble to make sure they didn't land in a metropolitan area, he says. As far as I'm aware, and I'm probably nearly 100%, there was no highball balloon involved in Westall. I would have certainly known about it if it had, and I wasn't aware of anything like that ever happening. Now, on a side note, John Sutcliffe had some correspondence with another researcher in the days or week after the ABC's article came out. And while he reiterated that he doesn't believe it was one of his highball high-altitude balloons, he couldn't discount the possibility that it could have been one of the US's balloons for Project Ashcan. And basically, Ashcan was the, I'll give you a brief rundown of what this is, kind of a bit of a fork in the road of this article. But so, you know, Project Ashcan, which was from 1956 to 1983, was a US-led upper atmosphere monitoring program designed to measure radioactive fallout from nuclear tests. Using high-altitude balloons sampling, the project analyzed global stratospheric debris to track nuclear weapons testing and atmospheric conditions, later replacing its original samplers with refined, more efficient direct flow filter samples by 1960. Watch this space, essentially. I'm trying to see if there are any records in the National Archives of Australia, the National Archives in the United States, as well as Foyer through the Department of Energy in the US, to see if there are any records that can rule out it being an Ashcan high-altitude balloon or support John Sutcliffe's thoughts that it may have been a US high-altitude balloon. Again, I'm not necessarily investing any stock in that hypothesis, but I'm going to try and track down any documentation to validate or invalidate that claim. The article goes on to say the Jindovic radio-controlled target drone developed by Australia for guided missile testing was another suspect, as were the U-2 high-altitude planes. But the Jindovics and U-2s looked like aircraft with wings and a fuselage. Mr. Ryan also chased down the weather balloon theory, following on from an article in the Age newspaper at the time, suggesting that the object might have been a weather balloon. The Weather Bureau released a balloon at Laverton at 8:30 a.m., and the westerly wind blowing at the time could have moved it into the area where the sighting was reported, the newspaper said. Mr. Ryan disagrees, maintaining the wind data from the day indicates it was blowing from the southwest, meaning that the weather balloon's most likely track was in a more northerly direction after launching from Laverton in Melbourne's west. There was no mention of the weather balloon being collected and being identified. And when I looked into the weather data for the day, it actually didn't stack up at all, he says. Mr. Saunders is less sure. If we were to invoke the principle of Occam's razor, which basically says the simpler explanation is often the best one to choose, then the weather balloon is the likely candidate, he says. Mr. Ryan also scoured newspaper files to find local publication. The Dandenong Journal did most of the coverage of the event, picking up on witness reports. Picking up on witness reports, there were up to 5 planes flying near the UFOs. The reporters' attempts to find pilots who could add anything to the mystery failed. So the trail went cold, and it went cold pretty quick, Mr. Ryan says. Retired Australian Army Lieutenant Colonel Neil Smith, who now works as a military historian, has studied the available evidence about Westall. He believes the sightings over Westall could have been part of a secret research and development project, most likely run by the US, and something went wrong. The fact that other aircraft were sighted near the UFOs suggests to him that these 3 UFOs were off track or going off track. That would account for the incredible rapidity of the troops, if I can call them that, who responded within the hour on that day, he says. I can well understand that the witnesses would have been encouraged not to say anything about what they had seen. What have you got to hide? Witnesses want answers. 60 years on, Joy Clark and her former classmates believe it's way past time for an official explanation of what happened that day. No harm done explaining it now, says Ken Stallard, who argues technology would have moved on significantly. What have you got to hide, whoever you are? Yesterday, to mark the 60th anniversary, witnesses and locals gathered at the Flying Saucer Playground at the Grange, built by the local council to commemorate the event. History is something that's really fragile, Mr. Ryan says as he wanders through the grounds. Having something physical here that creates an opportunity for people who have come afterwards to know something happened that day, something mysterious. For Tanya Vassi, the anniversary is a reminder that it's time for answers. It's okay to talk about it now. At my age, it doesn't matter if someone thinks I'm a little bit loony. She says, I know what I saw. And then it ends with Watch Australian Stories, the Westall UFO Mystery on ABC iView. So again, I believe a wonderful article by the ABC. Kudos to producer Rebecca Latham and her reporter partner there for putting that story out. I think they did a great job of capturing a lot of facets of the Westall case. And that is a good segue into now the actual Australian story airing. Now, again, I'm not going to play for you the entire episode. I would encourage you to watch it. The link is in the show notes below, but I will play for you the promo, the trailer that the ABC put out, obviously encouraging people to tune in and watch Australian Stories episode on the Westall UFO mystery. And here it is. So there you go. So if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to check it out. I think Australian Story did a wonderful job. Could have maybe done without the Richard Saunders from the Australian Skeptics. I would have much preferred Bill to be in there providing his commentary, as he's done a wealth of he's got a wealth of knowledge and done a lot of research on the Westall case. But I guess they decided, the higher ups at the ABC decided to include Richard for balance. So, but nonetheless, do check it out if you haven't seen it. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Nothing new again for folks that are well versed with the Westall case, but again, for the larger populace, you know, it's always interesting and intriguing to me how few people actually know about the Westall case, not just in the US and other countries, but in our own backyard. You know, having chat with people, and I'll ask them, are you familiar with any cases in Australia? And I'll talk about Westall, and they've never heard of it. So hopefully the Australian Story will encourage people to take a look at it, and even potentially encourage witnesses or family members of witnesses to come forward. And in point of fact, that's exactly what happened. Shane Ryan had the son of a police officer that responded to the Westall incident on the day come forward and provide some information. I actually had an email from someone just this morning telling me that they were at a different school on the 6th of April 1966, and they saw what they recall to have resembled a flying saucer in shape. Now, and that school was approximately 10 kilometers away from Westall. So I'll certainly be sharing that witness's comments with Shane Ryan, so he can add it to the list. So I'm always of the opinion, there's always more information that can come to light, more witnesses that can come forward, and I think that is only a positive thing, and can only help potentially reveal further breadcrumbs. As I mentioned, I was really fortunate enough to be invited to participate in the Australian Story episode. So I'll just play you one brief clip, not to blow my own trumpet, but to obviously show you that I was in fact in it for more than 2 seconds. So I was pleased to be able to contribute and provide some commentary on the Westall case. So again, link is in the description below. If you do want to watch the episode, feel free. But this was one of my pieces of commentary. And that is a good segue into the final slide that was shown in Australian Stories episode. It was this slide at the very end. So let me play this for you. So at the end of the episode, Australian Story asked the Department of Defence if it had any records about the Westall incident, including in relation to research and development. It declined to respond. Not overly surprising there, because all of my efforts reaching out to the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, as well as the Defence media team, all of my inquiries have gone unanswered to date, which is incredibly frustrating. And let me give you a quick example of what I'm referring to. So I had reached out to the Defence defence media team, following Australian Stories airing. This was on the 7th of April. I reached out, and I'll just read it to you. High Defence Media Team, I'm writing to request a formal comment from the Department of Defence following the airing of ABC's Australian Story episode, The Westall UFO Mystery, broadcast on Monday, 6th of April. It should have been broadcast on 6th of April 2026, not 1966. Error on my part. The program presented compelling witness testimony and archival evidence regarding the 1966 Westall incident, specifically highlighting long-standing allegations of military intervention, the confiscation of evidence, and the intimidation of civilian witnesses. Specific inquiries, documentary evidence. Does the Department of Defence maintain any record of military involvement at Westall High School or a wooded area located to the south of the school known as the Grange on 6th of April 1966? Archival transparency. Witnesses continue to claim a comprehensive report was compiled by or for the Department of Supply at the time. Can the department confirm the status of any files relating to this event that remain unreleased to the National Archives? National security. Does the department currently view the phenomena described by hundreds of witnesses as having posed a risk to people, property, aviation, safety, or national security? Furthermore, I wish to address the Minister of Defence lack of a written response to petition EN 7896, which called for an independent inquiry. This petition closed in September 2025, yet the government has remained silent despite the significant public interest. After 60 years, the department's continued silence and the minister's failure to address petition EN 7896 is being viewed by many as a slap in the face to the hundreds of witnesses who have lived with the weight of their experiences and the memory of the official intimidation since 1966. Given the gravity of the testimony and allegations aired on Australian Story, when can the public and the petitioner expect a formal, transparent response from the minister regarding the request for an independent inquiry? And then obviously signing off. Now, that was on the 7th of April. I followed up on the 9th. I followed up on the 15th. And do you think I've gotten any response to date? None and Buckley's. And sadly, that's also true of my outreach to the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles. I'd actually reached out to him back in March, basically along the same lines of my copy in the email to the Defence Media Team. 17th of March, 23rd of March, 30th of March, 8th of April, 15th of April. Do you think I got a response? Got none and Buckley's. So incredibly disappointing that someone that is elected into or is in a position of authority and power in the Australian Department of Defence gives, quite frankly, absolutely no fucks about what happened to those witnesses on the 6th of April 1966. And I do think it is a complete slap in the face to the witnesses that have lived with this experience for 60 years. Some, perhaps many, have endured ridicule, stigma, been ostracized for talking about it. And that's why it's encouraging that now the witnesses are really strong advocates for other witnesses to come forward and talk about it, because there is safety in numbers. So incredibly disappointing that the Minister of Defence and the Australian Department of Defence continue to remain silent on the Westall case, particularly if there is the holy grail of documentary evidence of this comprehensive report that was compiled by the then Department of Supply. I want to be mindful of everyone's comments and questions that you've submitted. So let me, and by the way, let me just show you to prove to you that the petition was certified and was referred to the Minister for Defence's office. This is a record on the House of Representatives Petitions Committee report number 03 regarding petitions and ministerial responses, dated the 27th of October 2025. So if I just pull up the petition in question, on the 27th of October 2025, petition EN 7896, which was secured 831 signatures from, 831 petitioners requesting an independent inquiry into the Westall incident. That certified petition was formally submitted to the Minister's office for review and written response. And to date, how many months is that? November, December, January, February, March, April, May, what's that? More than 6 months later, he has not yet bothered to respond. And I don't even know if he has actually seen the petition. I've got a couple pending Foyer requests to see if we can even get some answers on, well, has the minister even reviewed that petition? Has any of his staffers or anyone in his office even bothered to review the petition signed by 831 petitioners? So watch this space. But again, do want to showcase some of the questions and comments you had. So Alan B9337 comments, RAAF-based Point Cook was used up until 1992 and it was 20 k's southwest of Melbourne CBD near Werribee, a source for the planes. Certainly, potentially, it's long been suggested that the light aircraft, these Cessna-type planes that were observed, up to 5 of them in the sky, it was thought that maybe they had come from Moorabbin, which was only about 5 kilometres away. But if you listen to Andrew Greenwood's testimony to James McDonald, and there's an audio recording of that you can listen to, he sat down and had an interview with James McDonald in 1967, so a year or just over a year after the Westall incident. And Andrew Greenwood commented that the light aircraft, the planes, appeared to be black or a dark color. Now, military aircraft of the day, particularly in New South Wales, military aircraft, particularly army aircraft that were Cessna-type aircraft, were dark green in color. Now, if it was in fact a dark-colored aircraft that was seen in the sky above Westall High School, does that potentially point to it being military aircraft? If so, where were those military aircraft deployed from? Were they deployed from Point Cook? Were they deployed from Laverton or another base? Who knows? And unfortunately, there has been very, very little information that has ever come to light regarding the light aircraft that were observed on the day. And to George's point, yes, Moorabbin is only a few minutes away. And if you're at the Grange, you look up in the sky, it's very, very easy to see light aircraft, and certainly you can hear them fly overhead. So where do those aircraft come from? Your guess is really as good as mine. Marie, great to see you, my friend. Grant, were the men in dark suits there on the same day or later? My understanding is that there were men in dark suits that, and Tanya Vassie speaks to this specifically in the Australian Story episode, that she recalls there being men in dark suits with very slim black ties that interviewed her about what she had seen. And in an interview with Ross Coulthart a couple of years ago, when these two gentlemen tried to suggest to her that what she had seen was perhaps a top secret weather balloon, she commented publicly to Ross that they had a distinct American accent. So, think of what you will regarding Men in Black. I mean, that fits the description. They were wearing black suits and black ties. Why were they? What were they asking of Tanya? What did they want to know? What was their motivation? Why were they there? They're all questions that remain unanswered. Let's have a look at some of the other questions. Yes, George makes a good point. Andrew Greenwood said about, this was in his Andrew Greenwood's interview with James McDonald, said about half of the students were out in the football oval. There were 600 students approximately enrolled at the school that year. So, there you go. Upwards of 300 students, may have observed something on the day. And you can see from ABC's article there how many witnesses Shane Ryan has been able to interview and track down to date. I'm also glad that they didn't play the X-Files in the 10 News segment there. It's and unfortunately, we're not through that completely. They still do play the X-Files during interviews, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Mark's comments, the Australian government will never admit anything about UAPs, UFOs. Well, if history is anything to go by, since 1996, it certainly looks that way. Let's have a look. Yes, TARDIS, if you haven't watched it, do check it out. I think it was very, very, very well done. Zed S5S. Did anyone else in the area see it and military aircraft other than the kids? I'm not, and George, you might be able to weigh in here. I'm not aware of anyone other than those that are at Westall High School seeing light aircraft, but I am aware of members of the public that were not on school grounds observing anomalous objects in the sky. Obviously, Paul Smith is the most recognized. Dee Sadike, who is a student at a school several kilometers away from Westall High School. You have other members of the public that were just residents and workers going about their day. And you obviously have some other students that were at other schools that saw something in the sky. So it is an interesting, diverse mix of witnesses, not just on the school grounds on the day of the incident. I think Bill is in the house, so great to see you, Bill, as always, my friend. Thanks for tuning in, and I think you had a comment here, so I'll come to that. Jojo Diamonds, wasn't there a Jojo Diamonds asked, wasn't there a man front the property near the Grange? Not too sure what if you want to unpack that question for me. Was there a don't know, trying to decipher that, can't quite figure it, but I kind of gave you a brief insight there as to who other folks that saw something that day. Let's have a look what else we have. Here we go. All comments are welcome. Stop it, Grant, you crazy man. Love you. And Ross repping Oz as the mainstream. Won't touch this shit with a barge pole. You'll be the first requested for interviews when shit hits the fan. I appreciate your comments there, Brent. I seem to be having more people reach out to me for comment these days. Bill, great news. So Bill says, "Hi Grant, I've sent you a USB copy with a USB with a copy of the 3 videos I took that covered the 2006 reunion, plus some interviews from the day, plus 2 audio interviews with the Anderson children as adults. These should arrive next week." When they do, Bill, would love to have you on. Maybe we can tee up something next month, and we can play it and go through it, and obviously have your supporting commentary. So great news. Thanks for sending those down. Let's have a look. Paul Veening 6861. The government doesn't know. The fact will shatter 90% of the population's perspective of the government. He goes on to say, these people are very brave. I learnt years ago to keep my mouth shut. George's comments, I wish the skeptics would keep their mouths shut. Kashi Chris in the house. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for tuning in. Jimmy raised a comment there directed at George. Australian government has 0 files on Westall because the government in 1966 handed everything to the Americans. I've done a Foyer to the US National Archives for this. So fingers crossed. It's better to try and fail rather than fail because you never tried. So kudos to you, Jimmy, for at least having a go. Harry Bridges, great to see you, my friend. The media in Australia seem to handle the anniversary with a bit of respect. I agree, which is new for the Australian media. Grant, have you noticed a change in the Australian media's approach? There has been. I would say that the press coverage that we're covering in tonight's episode is significantly more respectful than it has been in the past. Now, there's kind of one exception to the rule that I'll play towards the back end. I wouldn't say it's disrespectful, but it was kind of done in a tongue-in-cheek manner. And there was the dreaded X-Files theme, which I had to hold my tongue on. But I would agree with you that there seems to have been a bit of a shift moving away from, adopting that kind of air of ridicule and, positioning it as just a silly conversation to have. It seems to be a far more respectful conversation as of late anyway. Bill notes, please note I've amended one paragraph just after my quoting the Clayton calendar in my prehistory article on my blog, mainly regarding John Pickney. We'll come to that as we go through tonight. Bill, I do want to call attention to your great blog article because there's some great info in there It's a long one, so perhaps I won't read the whole thing, but I do certainly want to speak to it. So thanks for your comments, folks. Want to use that as an opportunity to kind of switch gears now and talk about, where am I? Here we go. The Westall Library event. So if I just pull up my browser again here. So on the 12th of April, so really just a little over a week after the Westall Witnesses reunion event, Westall Libraries, located at the grounds of Westall High School and in between Westall Primary School, they put on their formal Westall UFO 60 Years On event. Now, it's a bit of a bummer that they included a CGI photo that is not a photo from Westall. No photographic evidence has ever seen the light of day from Westall. So it's unfortunate that they've included that photo. And it's unfortunate that when you are actually at the Westall, the venue at the library, they were handing out, it's a bit hard to see, so I'll show it in a second, but they were handing out some paraphernalia that you could take away as a keepsake. They did live stream the event, but unfortunately, they only live streamed it. It's now a private video, so you can't actually view it, which is a bit unfortunate. So a bit of a shame that they opted to do that, but you had to kind of watch the live stream if you wanted to see it. But what I wanted to show you, and we'll jump on into some perhaps photographs from the event. Let me just pull up my trusty deck here. Here we go. So at the Westall Libraries event, it was an opportunity for members of the general public to come along. It was a free event. You did have to register because space was limited. And it kicked things off with a panel, a Q&A panel. And from right to left there, you have primary witness D. Sadike. You have Tom, I can't remember his last name. It's left me. It's escaped me for the moment. Terry Peck, Joy Clark, Marilyn Smith, and Paul Smith at the end there. So it was a great opportunity for them to speak for a few moments and share their key takeaways from what it was they saw, and then take members from the general public. And Shane Ryan, principal investigator, was there as well. But what was available for for takeaway as a keepsake on the day were these little postcard, not postcard things, but bookmarks. And again, you can see, unfortunately, they've used the bloody CGI UFO image. So that was a bit of a bummer that they chose to use that. But there was some documents for takeaway. And let me just read it to you. This was the flyer that they had available. Westall UFO 60 Years On, Westall Library, Sunday, 12th of April, 2 to 5 p.m. Celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Westall UFO sighting at Westall Library. Hear first-hand accounts in a panel discussion and Q&A. Enjoy an author talk with lead researcher Shane Ryan, and explore how local stories are preserved through oral history recordings, a fascinating look at one of Australia's greatest mysteries. There were a couple of the little keepsake items that people could take away as well. So it was wonderful to hear from a number of the primary witnesses. I had an opportunity to ask a question. I wanted to ask Shane a question about the light aircraft that were observed on the day by some of the witnesses. Again, it's unfortunate that there hasn't been a lot of information. The light aircraft aspect of the case really has not had a lot of discussion and deep dives, because there's just been such a lack of testimony. You haven't been able to track down the pilots, although Shane Ryan has made some progress on that front. So it was really wonderful to hear from the witnesses, have members of the public ask them questions. And then obviously Shane Ryan went into, and full credit, by the way, to Ian McLean for these wonderful photographs. I hope Ian doesn't mind me sharing these. He posted them to the Westall Flying Saucer Facebook group. Shane Ryan then did a wonderful presentation on not just the Westall case, but the Westall region, the region of Clayton South in the day, and I showed what I thought was some really wonderful historical photos of the area and the surrounds, what it looked like at the time. And this was a photograph that someone had taken from one of the power pylons. They climbed up it and they'd taken a photo. And what you can see in the background there is that wooded area known as the Grange. And in the foreground are all of the market gardens that lead up to the Grange area, which was the Grange was a private property, a residence of a house that had no longer any occupants within it. But the Grange was an area where the school students would do their cross-country runs. So really wonderful presentation from Shane. And Shane unveiled the name of his new book that's about to be released, called, a bit hard to see there, but his new book, his first book, is called In Broad Daylight, The Day UFOs Arrived Over Melbourne, the story of the 1966 Westall UFO incident. And Shane says that is currently with the editors. He is hoping to have the edited version locked down within the coming weeks or month, and that will then hopefully go to the publishers. So we should see that become available, get launched within the next couple of months. And I, for one, am incredibly excited to see what Shane includes in his book, with a lot of photographic material as well. Photographs of the witnesses, of the school, of the surrounds of the day. So it will be really quite fascinating to have a read of that book. Want to just transition and pay kudos to, if I can bring it up here. Actually, and I did have an opportunity to get in Shane's ear later that day. I caught up with both James Rigney, second from the right, and Rosie Jones, who directed the documentary Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery. It was great to have an opportunity to pick Shane and James and Rosie's brains about not just the filming of the documentary those years ago, but some of the stories that they had recollected over the years. Do want to pay a good shout out to the folks at the MuralMen. So congratulations, obviously, and my respect and kudos to Andrew Matheson and his colleague Ollie of the MuralMen, who have commemorated the Westall incident with this incredible mural. This is at Westall High School, and just want to show for you a brief time-lapse video of them putting this together. I think they did a wonderful job. This was a project that Andrew was working on for, I would say, well over a year. When I met with him briefly at the Westall Witness Reunion event, when was it? In last year, April of last year, we had a brief discussion about it, and he was trying to get the project up and running. So kudos to Andrew and Ollie for getting it done. I think they did a wonderful job. And this gives you a sense as to the work and effort that went into it. So let me play this for you. It does have audio, but it's music. So I'm not playing the music because I don't want to get hit with a copyright strike. But I think they did a wonderful job. So again, congrats to them for some great work. And so that was the finished product. So again, I think they did a great job. Want to see a couple of the comments that have come through. My dreaded mouse has died on me, so I'm going to have to use my scroll pad here. Let's have a look. Okay. Pine Cedar 180 says maybe a call for anonymous interviews from any of the government pilots willing to come forward. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there are no reporting protocols in place at the moment at all. If you're a member of the Australian Defence Force, there is no mechanism in place to report an observation of a UAP. Royal Australian Air Force says, yeah, our current occurrence reporting and safety protocols are sufficient. They're not. because what happens if you report it? It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't get investigated. There's no investigatory body. And if you do report an observation of UAP, UFO, there's still an air of stigma that plagues the Australian Department of Defence. And Ross Coulthart has, talked about this when he had an F-35 pilot sit down with him in his living room. And the F-35 pilot said, we've seen things we can't readily identify, anomalous objects in our airspace. And Ross says, would you report it? Says, what do you think? No, I'm getting a message from the Chief of Air Force that this is not an issue that's been taken seriously. And if I do report it, there's potential for future career opportunities to be jeopardized, ridicule, stigma, and so on. So why would anyone want to report it when there's that air of stigma in the air? And why would anyone want to volunteer a report when there are when they have no idea what's going to happen to their report, where we'll actually go? Jimmy, I certainly echo your sentiments. It was a great presentation. The whole day was truly great. I echo your comments there, George. I think they did a wonderful job with the event, and it was a pretty cool job that they did, Bex. I agree with you with the mural. Detox 098. Is it possible that this was a CIA cover-up of spy balloons launched from Pine Gap? From Pine Gap, I don't think that's probably a plausible explanation given the sheer distance. But I know George and I have spoken about this, and he is certainly of the opinion that the files were exported, were handed over to the US, and that the agency that more than likely were the recipients, and the custodians of those documents was likely the CIA. Sorry, I meant call for pilots of the aircraft during the Westall incident. My apologies. I believe there has been. So Shane Ryan has attempted to connect with the pilots or family members of the pilots, and I think he's had some success, which will probably be documented in his book. He spoke briefly about that on at the Westall Library's incident, following on from the question that I asked. He gave an interesting response that his impression was based on information that he'd been given from maybe family members of the pilots, as the pilots were told not to talk about what they saw, and they were kind of spooked not to talk about what they saw, which I found to be some interesting comments from Shane. All right, so let's have a look at some of the other press coverage that the Westall 60th anniversary received, because it was really encouraging to see that the Dandenong Star Journal, which was formerly the Dandenong Journal, the first news outlet to report on the Westall case, the day after the Westall Library event, they ran a story about the witnesses. So UFO mystery remains vivid in memory. So I'll read this. It's a brief one, so I'll read it for the benefit of folks that like to listen to the podcast. By Cam Lucado Wells. The elusive silver disc that danced in the blue sky over Westall in 1966 still sears in observers' memories. Joy Clark, a former Westall High School student at the time, bristles at those who dismiss what she and more than 300 others saw in broad daylight 60 years ago. I have nothing to lie about. I asked them one question: were you there? Well, I was, and so were 300 other people. I say, end of story. She joins the chorus of witnesses and researchers calling for the long-awaited release of government files to shine more light on the incident. We just want some verification for something unusual, verification that something unusual happened on that day. If they have evidence that it was an experimental craft, fine. But otherwise, we're not going to accept this fact. They keep flagging that it was just a weather balloon. If that was the case, why was the army there? The dark suits, police, fire brigade, the area cordoned off, the roads closed. All good questions. On the 6th of April 1966, she was in science class around 10:30 a.m. when a girl raced in from the corridor to say there were flying saucers in the sky. Her teacher, Andrew Greenwood, who was later interviewed by Dandenong Journal, wouldn't let the students out until the recess break. At recess, we bolted out to the school oval and there were flying saucers. She describes 3 metallic saucer-shaped objects with lights around the bottom. 5 little aircraft from Moorabbin Airport played a game of cat and mouse with them. The UFOs would zoom up in the air, then be over there, then over there. Their speed was amazing. At the same time, the little planes would have to do a big circle to get anywhere near them. Some of her peers were in massive hysteria, a chaos of yelling, screaming, running, crying, and excitement. I was absolutely in awe. Some of the kids were scared. I was transfixed. I thought, what in the hell was this? They were trying to get kids back into the class. It took 3 hours to do it because no one wanted to. Army jeeps rolled down Rosebank Avenue that afternoon. Joy remembers guys with clipboards and soldiers wearing camouflage. Students were pulled into the principal's office and met men in dark suits. Residents were visited door to door and told to shut their mouths, she says. Joy remembers speaking with 3 members of the Victorian UFO Society at her family's table. They took her photos in one of the grass circles, which by the time had been burnt out by authorities. She was one of the students who defied a stern ban against going to the Grange Reserve after the incident. It was where many had spotted the flying object behind the trees and where a large circle of flattened grass was reportedly found. She and her sister spied on 2 soldiers at such a circle, digging soil and keeping an eye out. Joy also ignored a media ban issued by the school principal while people in uniforms hovered behind him. She stepped up for an interview with a Channel 9 reporter outside the school that day until a police officer put a hand on her shoulder and told her to stop talking. The news service was also directed to stop filming and leave. There's reportedly no record of the news report in the TV station's archives. Another witness was Marilyn Smith, who was interviewed by Dandenong Journal in 1966 and provided a sketch of what she saw. At the time, she was 14-year-old Westall High School student Marilyn. I think it was Marilyn Eastwood, not Greenwood, Marilyn Eastwood. The object was round with a hump on the top and round things underneath, she told the newspaper. The journal wrote her sketch closely resembles sketches and photographs of other unidentified flying objects reported from many parts of the world. Today, she remembers being awestruck by what she saw and what happened. We were all kids and dealt with it differently. The hysteria was huge. We went off in different directions. My jaw was touching the ground. I just couldn't believe it. Am I imagining this? Its shape was like 2 saucers on top of each other. It had a distorting vapor around it. It wasn't even there for a minute. It turned on its side and it disappeared. Even though it was incredible and impressive, it was also terrifying. We didn't know what was going to happen. She remembers bolting across to find flattened grass at the Grange at lunchtime and after school being interviewed by the waiting Channel 9 news crew. I thought, the hell with it. I'll do it. I'll get detention, but it was worth it. At the Grange, she didn't care to touch the circles in the long grass. We didn't know if it was radioactive. We just sat behind the logs about 15 feet away. Smith says it's incredible how the tale has endured, but what she craves is an explanation. The US government now says that they saw UFOs. To find out the truth would be really good. And that was the article. So that was, a good opportunity for the Dandenong Star Journal to cover, obviously, some of the witnesses commemorating the 60th anniversary. But the Dandenong Star Journal didn't end there. The same day, they put out a second article. This one more focused on the fact that their official files, government files, perhaps still remain secret. Westall 1966 official files remain secret. And so we'll read through this article quickly as well by the same reporter. 60 years on, the government remains silent on the famous Westall event, to the frustration of surviving witnesses. Primary and high school students, teachers and market gardeners were awestruck as they watched up to 3 fast-moving silver objects in clear skies on a mid-morning just before Easter on the 6th of April 1966. They saw a giant circle of flattened grass at the Grange Reserve, was swarmed by military jeeps and troops that day. Schools were reportedly visited by men in dark suits while witnesses were slapped with a media ban. It remains one of the few daytime UFO sightings by schools of witnesses, many of whom are calling for the Department of Defense to release its report on the event. Who can say what was seen that day? Were they alien flying saucers or top secret military technology, weather balloons? A petition was tabled at federal parliament last year calling for an independent inquiry into the event. Defence Minister Richard Marles has yet to respond with the 90-day deadline, and his office didn't answer an inquiry from the Star News last week. What a shocker. It's a slap in the face to the witnesses who have lived with this for 60 years, the lead petitioner Grant Levac says. Why have the authorities not been transparent? That's the burning and enduring question that sits in the mind of so many people. Shane Ryan, an academic who's interviewed more than 330 witnesses of the UFO and grass circle since 2005, says there's a growing desperation for answers. Everyone is getting on, including me. There's that sense of urgency because lots of people have passed away. Recently, the door has been opened as US departments have been directed to release files on alien and extraterrestrial life, Ryan says. Westall witnesses are continuing to speak out for the first time, having remained silent out of fear for their reputations and careers. There's been a shift in society that people are more open to talking about things, Ryan says. Not necessarily coming to definite conclusions, but that something did happen and there was a sense of covering it up. Someone in the government may have known more than what the witnesses knew. Only weeks ago, Ryan spoke with the child of a high-ranking, well-credentialed Department of Supply official who investigated the incident and wrote a report at the kitchen table. The official kept a personal copy of his report, but upon his instructions, his wife incinerated the copy upon his death in 1970. Ryan hopes that the official copy of the report exists in the government archives, that it might break open what had happened. Dandenong Journal was the only media outlet raising questions at the time. A week after the incident, its front page was splashed with the headline, "Flying Saucer Mystery, School Silent." That month, it tried to penetrate the wall of secrecy, which was hastily thrown up after the sighting Who Were Five Pilots Flying Saucer mystery deepens on the 21st of April, 1966. Despite a media ban on staff and students, Westall High School teacher Andrew Greenwood told the Journal that 5 light aircraft circled and followed the object in a cat and mouse game. The object was like a thin beam of light about half the length of a light aircraft. Decades later, Greenwood said he was reprimanded and threatened with charges under the Official Secrets Act. He was also threatened with being labelled a drunk and the loss of his career. Yet the question on the 5 pilots remains unanswered, Ryan says. I've never given up on hope that the mystery would be solved. So again, another great article, some good reporting from the Dandenong Journal. And again, great to see the original outlet that covered Westall 60 years ago is also covering it to commemorate the 60th anniversary. So we're going to jump onto our next portion, folks. But again, I know some comments have come through. So let me come back to the comments that have come through. Let's say... we'll go back to Detox 098. Well, I understand the distance from Pine Gap, but the fact that the CIS spine balloons launched during the Cold War from Pine Gap seems to be the plausible explanation. Look, that's not an hypothesis that I have ever really heard of until you have raised it. But to me, it seems implausible that given the sheer distance and the weather conditions, something to fly such a vast distance and to just miraculously end up at Westall. I don't invest a lot of stock in that hypothesis. I'd probably invest more stock in it being something that was launched from Mildura. That seems a little bit more plausible to me than something launched from Pine Gap. But again, I can't discount it because there hasn't been any documentary evidence that has come to light. There's been no documentary evidence that really reveals any breadcrumbs as to what occurred on the 6th of April, 1966, which is incredibly frustrating. Harry Bridges, are there any theories about where the military came from? Is there a base nearby? There are a number of bases, number of Royal Australian Air Force bases. You also have the Victorian Barracks. the major Victorian barracks for Melbourne, or based in Melbourne, not too far away. So there was certainly a lot of research and development being done down by what was it called? Help me out, George or Bill. Not Fisherman's. There was an area where a lot of aircraft development, research and development was being undertaken, and that was within the Greater Melbourne area. You did have a number of Air Force bases in the surrounds as well. So as to if those light aircraft did come from a military base, it's anyone's guess really as to where they came from. The description of the camouflage army officers represent only American soldiers at that time. That's a very good point. So that might be the critical information in understanding what actually happened. So yes, it has been, it's been raised a few times that, well, only those that wore camouflage in the 60s in the military were the US. The Australian Army did not wear camouflage. So if that is in fact true, why was there a rapid response of both Australian and US military personnel? And there are thoughts that, well, if it was a sensitive, highly secret US top, craft or prototype that didn't go according to plan, well, then you would expect to have perhaps a joint response, US and Australian military response. I'm just speculating there. I've got no evidence to support that. But George chimes in with a good comment. They think the military came from the Victoria Barracks in St Kilda Road. Marie says, Grant, reason I wanted to know about when the men in dark suits arrived is because UFOX are trying to figure out why and how these Americans or whoever they were got there so quickly. Do you know if they arrived on the same day? I believe it was the same day because Tanya Vassie is the one that has commented that she was taken aside into a room and interviewed by men in dark suits with slim black ties. I understand that was either, it may not have been the day of the incident, but certainly in maybe the day thereafter. I mean, it was, Westall happened only days before the Easter break, the 2-week break. So it would have been before that break. If it didn't happen on the day of the incident, it likely would have been the following day. But I believe Tanya has mentioned that it may have been the same day. But don't quote me on that. So thanks for your question there, Marie. Detox to Harry Bridges. The Cold War led to a lot of American military deployed throughout Australia during this time. That's a very good point. And Shane did talk about the time that folks were living in the 60s in Australia, that Cold War era. So there was certainly US collaboration on research and development projects of aircraft. There was Pine Gap was about to get underway or had been kind of signed off on to be rolled out. So there we go. Fisherman's Bend. That's one. Thanks, George. So there was research and development happening at a place called Fisherman's Bend, where a lot of aircraft, the Jindavik, the Australia was very, very much at the forefront of research and development in aircraft in the 60s. And Fisherman's Bend was a place where a lot of that sensitive research and development was taking place. Bill chimes in. Harry Turner's boss, Bob Mathams, tilled the soil and cracked open a bottle of champagne at the site of Pine Gap back in 1966. Perhaps too early for balloons from Pine Gap, plus a long way to Westall. Good point. Harry Bridges, I guess the Vic Police have been approached to see if there were reports. Did the Vic Police have any records they kept from that time at all? Great question, Harry. And that is a new bit of information that came to light as a result of the Australian Story episode airing. So at the Westall Library's event, Shane Ryan confirmed that he had been in contact with only a couple of days before the event from the son of a member of the Springvale police station, either a sergeant or relatively high rank, and the son of this police officer that spoke to Shane Ryan said that at that time it was a requirement for the police to take contemporaneous notes of their interviews with witnesses, details of what had occurred, and they would document this in what were called running sheets. Kind of like, these days when if you have to give a witness statement to a police officer, they jot down all of their notes and then they might formally compile it into a report. So these comprehensive running sheets were incredibly important in the day because that information would often be used if police were required to testify at a court proceeding. So those notes would certainly be of significant value from documentary evidence perspective. And so what this son of this deceased Springvale police officer told Shane Ryan was that those running sheets were so incredibly important that they were locked in a safe at the police station. But the running sheets for the week of or the fortnight in, a fortnight around, would have been a week or a fortnight around the date that the Westall incident happened, were gone. They had been taken off site by officials with higher authority, a different agency. Those specific records over a 1 to 2 week period, which would have covered their response, their documentation, their running sheet responses of their on-site activity at Westall High School, those were taken off-site. Now, if that doesn't scream of a potential cover-up, then I don't know what does. So I've submitted a FOIA request to the Victorian Police to see a long shot, because running sheets from 60 years ago may have been destroyed, but a long shot to see exactly what running sheets are still available, if any, to see if we can identify what specific gap exists in that time frame. But that was very startling information that Shane Ryan revealed. That was hot off the press in terms of what he had heard from that new witness. So that was very, very interesting. I thought that about the police records, that usually don't keep records from decades ago unless it's part of a specific court case at the time. So it could well be that the records trying to chase them through FOIA is not going to yield any fruit. Worth a shot nonetheless. But the fact that it came from the son of this police officer saying that the running sheets for that time period, around the time that the Westall incident occurred, were taken off site, were taken away. That is interesting. Marie, Laverton Air Base, certainly a plausible option. And we have Daily Digital Digest. I've visited the landing site quite a few times. Westall is the craziest case I've read. Bummer I couldn't go to the meetup or events. Well, they happen on an annual cadence. It's an annual event around April each year. So if you do get a chance to go to a future event, maybe next year, it's certainly a very interesting day out, that's for sure. And I agree with you, the Westall case is such an intriguing and fascinating case 60 years on. So let's continue on, folks. I want to now play for you. I'm going to show you, if I pull up the trusty slide deck again. And again, we're covering all things Westall tonight. A great documentary filmmaker of the, let me just bring this up for you, of the Project Unknown Field Files. I think filmmaker Dhruv did a wonderful 2-part series. He's only released the first part as of yet, and it was wonderfully received. I think he did a wonderful job capturing some testimony from a number of the witnesses. He's about to release part 2 of his documentary on Westall, and I'll play for you the trailer so you can you can take a look. I think it's going to be quite interesting to watch. So let me pull this up for us. Yeah, Project Unknown field files. I've put the link in the show notes below. So if you want to have a look at the trailer, you can even have a look at the part 1 that was done. I think they did a great job. So let me play this for you.
I was out playing cricket on the Oval in 1966. Someone said, "Oh, what's that, up in the sky?" And we all stopped and looked up.
Oh, look out. It's got the dreaded. There we go.
There's this object in the sky, silver, bright, very bright. My boss was opposite me. He had his back to it, so he never saw it. 5 minutes later, all these school kids came over. They're balloons.
Yep.
Yeah.
What you saw was most
Not a
certainly not a
balloon.
balloon.
As I looked like that, I seen the second one. Now, a lot of people didn't see the second one.
With some other girls, we ran over to where they said it landed in the Grange behind the trees. I just followed them, and for some reason, we just seemed to know where to go.
I ran straight over to the corner of the school, jumped the fence. As I approached this clearing, I could see this great big round sort of oval object just hovering just above the ground. I actually thought it was on the ground, but it was just above the ground. And it was only about probably 10 metres away from me. And I just stood there frozen, really.
I saw the saucers landing in that area. Definitely seemed like something out of this world.
Do the balloons in either of these photos look anything like the craft you saw that day?
Nothing that resembled, is it?
I can't remember whether it was 9 or 10 that we watched the news on, but they had the footage of the flattened grass.
They obviously had notification or saw something on their radars that there was something in the area.
The government must have known about it earlier because they were here too quick.
Decades later, they still stand by what they saw that day. This is the Westall UFO incident.
So there you go. So that is coming. That is coming soon. Let me just turn this off. Of that. So that is not far away. So subscribe to Project Unknown Field Files if you want to be notified when they release that part 2. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I think, again, Drew did a wonderful job putting part 1 together. That the press doesn't end there. There's also some other press coverage of Westall, and I won't read through this article, but there was an article put out on Medium, the Medium website, "The Day the Sky Fell Silent, the Westall UFO Mystery Revisited After 60 Years" by Steen M. Nielsen, published on the 20th of April. I won't read through it. It's really just a very pretty comprehensive synopsis of the Westall case. So if you're interested to read through it, again, I've added the description in the show notes below, so you can have a look at it if you're interested. But what I really am interested to showcase briefly or talk about briefly is the article that Bill put out only recently on the 23rd of April. Bill has written a blog article, Westall 66, the prehistory of its investigation leading up to the 2006 reunion. Now, really good article. I've had a read through it a couple of times. I won't go through the entire article. I'll give you an opportunity to read it, but I do want to come to, Bill basically talks about some of the early witnesses that he was involved in securing testimony from and interviewing, going through in quite detail the entire Westall case, essentially, and looking at some documentation from Joy Clark's original report that she submitted to was it then the there we go, it was the VFSRS What I want to come to specifically is this here. So this was in the Age, the 7th of April, 1966. Now, you might be wondering, well, why am I talking about this? Because this has, I can say, pretty much definitively been debunked, and it was offered as a plausible explanation. So 7th of April, the day after the Westall incident, an unidentified flying object seen over the Clayton-Moorabbin area yesterday morning might have been a weather balloon. Hundreds of children and a number of teachers at Westall School, Clayton, watched the object during morning break. They said a number of small aeroplanes circled around it. However, a check later showed that no commercial, private, or RAAF pilots had reported anything unusual in the area. The Weather Bureau released a balloon at Laverton at 8:30 a.m., and the westerly wind blowing at the time could have moved it into the area where the sighting was reported. And you'll note that was covered in the Australian Story article. And so this is where Bill talks about this. Is Rebecca Latham, producer, The Westall UFO Mystery, which aired on 6th of April 2026, the 60th anniversary for Australian Story, an iconic ABC program, examined the weather balloon explanatory possibility. Richard Saunders of the Australian Skeptics suggested that the weather balloons were a plausible explanation. Rebecca Latham, the producer, found that the NOAA, the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, had the old Met balloon data sets online. In a report dated 23rd of April 2026, she wrote, "Once you adjust for Greenwich Mean Time and the US dating process, I realized the data behind the actual balloon launch from Laverton that morning at 9 a.m. is available. It gives us all the data, amazing, which is interesting and revealing, and it's possible to calculate the altitude and the speed and the whereabouts of the balloon in relation to Westall that morning. And the upshot, which now can be proved, is that it was too high and too far away to have anything to do with Westall. And of course, winds at higher altitude are very different to wind strength closer to the ground. It proves that by the time the balloon popped and descended, it was around 170 kilometers away from Melbourne. I've attached my written summary of the material and a non-animated track of the flight, plus the original NOAA data set. You can look this up for yourselves as well. I have an animated track of the flight arc as well, with the data for each point that balloon sensors noted. I had all calculations checked by a couple of honest students studying pure maths and geoscience at University of Western Sydney, and their findings concurred with mine." So this is the flight path that the weather balloon would have taken from Laverton to its eventual destination. And the orange marking is where Westall is, green is Laverton, where it's launched, and red is the where it ended up. So this is why it's of significant value to capture data, so that you can invalidate a hypothesis that's been presented, and that is always the go-to for a lot of folks that, you know, get on podcasts and talk about Westall, or even you saw in the news, the 10 News reporting, you know, people say it was a weather balloon. Well, we can say definitively with 99% confidence, I would say, that the plausible explanation that was reported by The Age on the 7th of April 1966, that it being a weather balloon that was launched from Laverton, cannot be attributed to what was observed at Westall. And so that's why it's important to try and source data, whether it be through publicly available reports, National Archives, Foyer, and so on. So Bill goes on to say, with the Highball explanation launched from Mildura on 5th of April 1966, I've been looking at Highball data, and while there is no definitive data that provides for certainty of a touchdown in the Westall area, the evidence available supports a relatively normal flight on the day before Westall, by virtue of the typical data set of monitor results. And the PM's, Prime Minister's Secretary's secret memo about 2 weeks later, reviewing insurance premiums, etc., supports that there was no dramatic hysteria inducing touchdown in a metropolitan area of either the balloon or its payload with parachute. And Bill includes some documentary evidence to support his what he's included there. So weather balloon and high bow seem a very poor fit for the explaining the bulk of the witness testimony, re Westall. And obviously includes, Bill includes some great source material, some of the reporting of the day. Andrew Greenwood, I won't go through the rest of the article. I'll give you all an opportunity to read through it. Again, very, very comprehensive. But that's what I wanted to kind of hit home, because that was relatively new information that the producer of Australian Story was able to obtain. Data that, again, can kind of, put the weather balloon hypothesis, certainly launched from Laverton, take that off the table. Bill, if there was anything that you think is of value for me to kind of call attention to in this this article you've done, because you've done a great job, it is incredibly comprehensive, feel free to let me know, and I'll be happy to cover it. That was what I wanted to touch on. Lovely young photo of Bill Chalker there. But feel free to, there was one other thing I wanted to touch on, talks about the Westall 66, the suburban UFO mystery. So really, really well-written piece by Bill. I would encourage you all to have a look at it. At the end, Bill basically just summarizes what's been happening as of late. The Westall events have been described in numerous articles, podcasts, documentaries, and other special events. The most prominent of these have been Rosie Jones' 2010 Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery, featuring Shane Ryan as he began his long focused investigation of the events. Zev Howley's The Man Who Saw Them Arrive documentary that was released not long ago. Grant Levac's Westall 60 Years On, which we live streamed from last month. The 60th anniversary reunion at the Grange, the iconic ABC Australian Story show episode, The Westall UFO Mystery, aired on the 6th of April 2026, the exact 60th anniversary, and the 12th of April 2026 Westall Library event, which featured a panel of Westall witnesses and Shane Ryan's detailed presentation and announcement of his forthcoming book, In Broad Daylight, the day the UFOs arrived over Melbourne, the story of the 1966 Westall 1966 Westall UFO incident. So again, really, really great piece from Bill. Let me just bring attention to some of the comments that are in the room. Bill might have left because it is getting a bit late, and I do want to wrap things up relatively soon. So let's just have a quick look. George says, Grant, the CSIRO was very interested in the Westall case, and they used a bobcat to remove the entire topsoil of a paddock where there was a landing mark in the grass behind a factory on Eline Road. Fascinating to know what their findings were. And I think Bex has asked that question: Did they release what they found, or why the CSIRO was interested? George. And George responds, hey, Bex, the CSIRO to this day deny having had any interest in the Westall event, this in spite of the guy in the factory reporting to Shane. They said they were CSIRO guys. So interesting. So do check out Bill's blog article, folks. It is incredibly comprehensive and well done. That is almost the last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap up, because I do want to play for you a brief radio interview. I was invited to speak with Gary Hardgrave of 4BC Brisbane, the Drive program, 5 o'clock every 5 o'clock each day. It was short notice. It happened earlier this week, and I had an opportunity to talk about the Westall incident. So let me play this for you again for those of you that are interested. There we go. All right, so let me play this. Now, this is where it's frustrating, and I held my tongue as hard as I could because the interview started off with this.
I love this. This explains a lot of things in society. It feels like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but Donald Trump, he's officially ordered the Pentagon to release all of the files on UFOs and extraterrestrial life. I don't think there's an ulterior motive here. He has had a tremendous interest in the subject for a long time, and he wants to get the truth. It's out there somewhere. He's directed the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and other agencies to identify and release every document they have on unidentified aerial phenomena, formerly known as UFOs. To help us make sense of what all this means and what might be hidden in the folders, we're joined by Grant Lavick, and he's one of Australia's leading unidentified anomalous phenomena. How can people putting Latin in this script doesn't help me? Researchers and the host of the Unexplained Rundown podcast. Grant, you can at least explain how to pronounce UAP properly. And he's the man who spends his time chasing freedom of information requests to find out what the government isn't telling us. Grant, I reckon there's a governments are locking down a lot of information. You must be happy that Donald Trump wants all of this declassified.
Well, look, I certainly applaud President Trump's, commitment to transparency. It's certainly to be applauded, and I do agree with you, Gary, that it is challenging to keep up with the ever-changing acronyms and terminology. Yeah. It used to be UFOs, now it's UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, unidentified anomalous phenomena. So it's constantly changing, but. I certainly applaud the Trump administration's efforts, but I'm managing my expectations.
Yeah, that's the point. We're all thinking that, we'll find out why Wi-Fi came from somewhere left of Uranus. We'll find out, why certain people we see in some shopping centres definitely come from Saturn. I mean, you just know that. We're not going to hear that, are we?
Well, and what's interesting is there are two competing narratives at the moment coming out of the United States. You have, at present, the Pentagon, the U.S. All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, its acronym is AARO, that has a congressional mandate to currently investigate UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, and really get to the bottom of better understanding the nature and the extent of UAP. And to date, it has repeated the line that it has found no evidence to suggest that UAP is extraterrestrial in origin, which is kind of a stark contrast to what a number of highly intelligent and credible whistleblowers and former intelligence officials have testified to before Congress and said publicly that there is really an 80-year cover-up of a highly sensitive, highly secretive, highly compartmentalized crash retrieval and reverse engineering program that operates in the dark within the black budget world of the defense in the US, and even allegations of there being agreements between the United States and extraterrestrials or non-human intelligence. So there are some pretty fantastical claims that have been made, but unfortunately, there hasn't been a whole lot of evidence presented to date to support those claims. And that's what we're hoping will come to light as a result of President Trump's commitment to transparency and disclosing documentation.
I hope that we do find out more. I think the world could actually stomach finding out more. I really do think that Men in Black was based on a true story. I mean, that's actually, no, that sounds like I'm being farcical, but I actually is a line. My wife will kick me in the shins metaphorically when I get home because I say, based on a true story. But I really do believe there is something to this. We can't just make this stuff up. There's got to be some sort of softening up of us to get ready for this reveal, Grant.
Well, look, you're 100% right, and it is a topic that needs to be taken seriously. Unfortunately, it's not being taken seriously in Australia at the moment. I can speak to that briefly, but you have, very credible military pilots, aviators, and even general aviation pilots that are seeing things in their airspace that they cannot readily explain, identify, or reconcile. And the problem has been in the United States for a long time that they're not reporting that information because of the stigma that's long plagued this topic. If you report an observation of a UFO, you're kind of ever labeled as the tinfoil hat guy, you have a black dot placed against your name, and you jeopardize future career opportunities promotions in your retirement. That culture has now changed significantly in the United States, where there is now mandatory reporting protocols in place. If you see something, you have to say something. Now, that's very, very different in Australia, unfortunately. The Australian Department of Defence took the issue of UAP, or formerly UFOs, very seriously between the 1950s to 1996, when it unfortunately washed its hands and said, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. But we live in a very, very different world 30 years later in 2026, when our US ally and Five Eyes partners taking this topic very seriously from a national security threat and safety of flight risk, when unfortunately Australia is sitting on its hands and doing nothing.
You know, when I was a kid, I'll publicly confess this. It's not the first time I've confessed it on this radio program. When I was a kid in the 60s, mate, I saw something that was unexplained. It was hovering, it was there, and then it took off. And it was the middle of the day. It wasn't the middle of the night. It was a disc-shaped object, and it flew south, okay? I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes. I was too young to have been on drugs. It really occurred. So as far as I'm concerned, something is out there.
And did you ever tell anyone about it?
Yeah, I have. I've told somebody similar to your good self about this in the past, and we talked about it because people have seen things, and they just think, oh, people will think I'm crazy. I mean, the production crew right now think I'm completely mad, and they're really going to keep me away from all sharp objects. But I'm setting myself up. But I saw it, mate, with my own eyes. As it was something that I could not explain. And could I tell anybody? No, I was 7. I mean, no one would believe me, but I saw it.
Well, I'll give you an interesting story, and you're not alone, because on the 6th of April, 1966, there was an incredible UFO sighting in our backyard in Australia, and not far from where I live in Melbourne. So on the 6th of April, 1966, at around recess at Westall High School, up to 200 plus children, so students, as well as some teachers and other members of the general public, saw up to 3 objects, anomalous objects, their school that they weren't able to readily explain or reconcile, but many of them commented that they resembled being flying saucer in shape. And shortly after that incident, there was a rapid military response on site. Students were told to shut up about it and stay quiet, not talk about it. Witnesses were intimidated. One of the teachers was told to shut up about it or he might lose his job because it would be easy for people to think that he was drinking on the job. And there was evidence that was confiscated as well. Now, if that was something so prosaic in nature, why has the Australian government, the Australian Department of Defence, never provided any documentary evidence as to what was observed in the sky above Westall High School? And the witnesses have lived with this experience for 60 years, and they deserve the truth and they deserve transparency from the government.
Well, I was in southern suburbs of Sydney. I was not imagining it. It was not a reflection. It was the middle of the day. It was not a school day, and they headed south. So maybe they went down to Melbourne after they left where I was. But I'm just saying, people have seen it. People have seen things, Grant, and I hope that what Trump is doing, amongst everything else that he's doing, people like to criticize him, but seriously, they're leading the way on disclosure. Let's see what happens, mate. It's good to talk to you. Let's stay in touch, Grant, because if there is something out there and it's been here, we need to know about it. I'm all for disclosure. Good to talk to you, sir. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, Grant Lavac, there you go. UAP. No, it's not United Australia Party. It's an unexplained, anomalous phenomena. Why do people complicate acronyms?
From the creator of... There you go. So... a colourful character, certainly a colourful character, Gary Hardgrave, but interesting to learn that he had his own sighting when he was a young child, and it happened in the 60s. So I saw an opportunity to kind of flag the Westall case there and really highlight Australia's current lack of engagement on this topic. So it was good to be able to increase some public awareness on that. And if I have an opportunity to go back and talk to Gary about what's going on in Australia or abroad, I would certainly be happy to do so. So again, just wanted to share that with you for folks that hadn't had an opportunity to hear it, because I did want to highlight Westall in that interview specifically. I also had an opportunity earlier this month to talk about the Westall case in a couple of podcasts. So I won't play any clips from those podcasts, but if you're interested to check them out, had a great chat with my friend Ryan Sprague earlier this month on Summer in the Skies. So you can find that on his YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And only earlier this morning, I love the AI rendition that I think that's probably an improvement on me in real life. But the Hidden Underbelly 2.0, I had a great opportunity to have a chat with them about the Westall case and UFOs down under. So if that's of interest to you, feel free to check it out. And of course, the documentary that I did a couple of years ago, if you haven't seen it, The Westall Witnesses, runtime of just shy of 90 minutes. You can check it out, descriptions in the show notes below. So that's everything, folks, that I wanted to cover off on Westall. Before we wrap things up, I'm committed to getting under 2.5 hours with this live stream. I do want to provide, on a separate note, one key Foyer update that I was able to bring to light earlier this week. But before we do, let's just have a look at any of the comments that you have submitted in the last segment. An interesting point from the Running Man Z5339. Can't believe some obnoxious skeptics keep pushing the weather balloon despite the contrary mass eyewitness reports and multiple high-speed UFO moving across the sky at extreme high speeds. It's a good point because, when you're factoring up, well, could it have been something prosaic like, and I'll come to Foyer in just a moment, could it have been something prosaic like a high altitude balloon or a weather balloon? Well, then you have to, if you take the witness testimony at face value, and I have found them, all that I've spoken to be incredibly compelling. Well, the flight characteristics of whatever it was they saw does not comport with the flight characteristics that you would expect from a deflating weather balloon. The students reported that these objects were moving at incredible rates of speed and zipping across all over the place. Now, that is not consistent with the behavior that you would find from a deflating weather balloon or perhaps a deflating high bow balloon. So the let's see, got another comment here. Foz Jam, how do I get in contact with you, Westall Grant? You can, if you just jump over to the website, theunexplainedrundown.com or grantlevac.com. Scroll to the very, very bottom, you'll see my email. It's simply just grantlevac@protonmail.com. So feel free to pop me an email if you wish. Happy to receive any correspondence from anyone that's interested to reach out. Yes, indeed, Short Order Cook. I bit my tongue something fierce as I heard the old X-Files theme came on, and I don't know how they get away with it. Maybe being in the news media, they're allowed to play, obviously, music of their choice or themes of their choice. I really don't know, but yeah. Marie, Bill C. and Grant, you should look into the 5 egg-shaped objects seen coming from the ocean off the south coast of South Australia, all flying in formation 7 or 8 February 1947, just before Roswell, in the newspapers on Trove, under a heading Flying Objects. Great call out there, Marie. I'm not familiar with that. Bill's probably much more in tune with historical cases and historical data than I am, but I'll take a note of that. And Trove, as Jimmy will say, is a wonderful resource. There's a lot of great stuff in those historical newspapers. So definitely have a look at that. Shorter Cook, thank you for your kind words there. And thank you, Bex, as well. Really appreciate your kind words, as always. As we kind of wrap things up, folks, I just want to highlight a recent Foyer request that I received a response to. So I'll pull up the document so you can see it. Those of you that are interested in following my Foyer work, I submitted a Freedom of Information Act request to NASA last year, I believe it was. Let's just double check. Yes. So, dear Mr. Levac, this is our final response To your FOIA request to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, dated and received in this office on October 24th, 2025, your request was assigned the above reference tracking number USIC the following. I asked for copies of emails, including supporting file attachments sent from to carbon copy to Dr. Daniel Evans, Assistant Deputy Associate Administrator for Research at NASA, that contain any of the following keywords: Five Eyes, FVEY, RO, UAP. Number 2, meeting agendas, attendee list, talking points, and meeting documents related to UAP briefings and discussions. Please limit this search to the period 1 April 2023 to 24 October 2025, the date they received my request. Now, you might be wondering why I went after correspondence for Dr. Daniel Evans. Well, the FOIA request that I'd previously submitted for emails for Dr. Daniel Evans, who was one of the members of NASA's independent study team for UAP, when Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick on the 31st of May of 2023 announced to the world at that NASA public meeting that he had just held the inaugural AARO's inaugural Five Eyes forum on UAP, and that Sean Kirkpatrick confirmed in that statement that Dan Evans attended that Five Eyes forum, I submitted a FOIA request for emails for Dan Evans, and what came back was the meeting agenda for AARO's inaugural Five Eyes, or AARO's Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting. So I had some previous success with FOIA, with Daniel Evans as a target of FOIA, and so I went after his emails, and I got 141 pages of documents in response. Now, I'm not going to go through every single document. I've added the link in the show notes below. If you want to read all of these emails, these documents, you can. But what is interesting is I'm just going to jump to page 11. And I just want to call out a few, if it will let me go there. Let's see if I can go there. There we go. So this is the one that I want to come to. All right. So this is about the Go Fast UAP footage that NASA, when it presented its report, said that it had come to the determination that the Go Fast video was more than likely a balloon, was something that was not anomalous. It was prosaic object. And so correspondence on the 1st of June of 2023 at 1:40 p.m., Dan Evans wrote, "Hi, Catherine. I'm copying Josh Semeter, who led the analysis for Go Fast. Quick responses, and Josh, feel free to step in here. The team," actually, let's go back if I want to. Here we go. I'll go just down a few emails. Let's start from here. So the original email was on the 31st of May, 2023, the actual day that there was the NASA's public meeting. "Hi, Catherine. Hope you're well. Thank you so much for a tremendous event today. Liberation Times did not get the opportunity to ask any questions, so I wanted to follow up. When attempting to explain the Go Fast video, can you confirm if anyone," so this is Chris Sharp's outlet, "can you confirm if anyone in the study group had access to sensor data or spoke to those aviators that witnessed it? Is it NASA's official position that the Go Fast video has been explained and was likely traveling at 40 miles per hour? Is it Dr. Kirkpatrick's position the apparent metallic orbs are not anomalous despite no apparent flight surfaces and no signature? Best wishes, Chris." So we'll focus on Go Fast. From Catherine to Daniel Evans, "Are these questions more in AARO's purview?" Dan Evans' response, I'm copying Josh Semeter, like I said, the team did not have study to the raw sensor data. However, this video is publicly available, and fortunately, the video has all the necessary attributes on the display, e.g., the elevation angle of the camera, aircraft altitudes, etc. It's important to recognize that the UAP team is a group of external experts who are independent from NASA. This is the gold standard of scientific review. NASA has not taken an official position on the origin of Go Fast, but has no reason to doubt our independent commission of experts and stands by them. 3, this is a question for AARO. Follow-up email this is from Josh, who Dan had referenced. Catherine, just to add a few things to Dan's comments. No, our panel did not speak with the aviators. You think you would want to do that. The analysis is based purely on the information in the publicly released video. So they didn't speak with the aviators. They didn't look at any of the raw sensor data. The geometric calculations I showed suggest that the object is not moving at an extraordinary velocity. Any errors in the assumptions used in the analysis, e.g. Object is moving in a straight path, wind speed is known, would not change this conclusion. However, this does not mean go fast is explained. The data are insufficient to determine what the object is, e.g. its size, shape, material. As mentioned above, we cannot determine from the data whether this object is a metallic orb or has any flight surfaces. So that very much sounds like to me that NASA is undecided on what go fast is, and that they didn't look at any of the raw data, and I think that's pretty much that one. So that was interesting, and I'll jump to another section. Let me jump down to this one. Here we go. This one is from Sean Kirkpatrick after he had retired. Wednesday, the 10th of January, his last day of service was the 1st of December, 2023. He reached out to gentleman Andrew Hamilton at NASA. Andrew, Dan Evans passed me your info, so I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I recently retired from the federal government as the director of AARO, and I had a paper recently come out in Nature with some colleagues of mine at the University of Utah. You can find the paper here if you're interested. We're working on a second paper looking at correlation factors to a variety of other known sources, and of course balloons are a major one. We need a little assistance deciphering the NOAA database, or any thoughts on a better database that also contains historical launches and tracks. Would you mind speaking one of our team members who's working that analysis to help get the database deciphered properly? Thanks very much, Sean. So for the guy that apparently is not interested in the UFO topic, retires and leaves AARO after his retirement, is still working on papers regarding the UAP. Why is he still talking about it and talking about it with such authority when he's no longer in that position at AARO? Again, just interesting correspondence that I noted in there. And the last thing I wanted to highlight for you, which I found quite interesting, was this one. This is an email from Lady Patty, NASA Records Officer, Office of the Chief Information Officer, Patty Stockman, email to Dan Evans on the 9th of February of 2024. Hi, Daniel. I just tried calling you in Teams to have a very quick chat to get an idea of what sort of data records you may have gathered over the past year or so as you've been in the saddle riding herd over UAP. We want to just get a concept of what sort of records you may have that are going to fall under these mandates of the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. For your information, Christy and I compiled for our management in OCIO and for NASA's Office of Legislative Affairs the attached summary of the most significant requirements of the Act concerning management of UAP records and the impacts on both SMD and OCIO, us in records management. Perhaps you'll find it useful as well. Clearly, you or maybe other NASA orgs you identify are the custodian of any such records. We definitely see you as the primary subject matter experts and feel like you probably have a leg up on the requirements the Act levies on us. We're here to confer with you in any way that will be useful. Let's tag up soon so you can at least apprise us of the nature of UAP records we may have as an agency. So NASA. The response, oops, caught a typo in the version I just sent. Our org is IDAS, so that's, don't worry about that. It's a relevant add-on comment. The response from Dan Evans, Patty. Hi, Patty, thanks for email. I'm also copying Mark McInerney, who is the NASA's UAP, Director of UAP Research, that was a direct liaison to AARO. NASA's Director of UAP Research. I am reattaching your second attachment for Mark's awareness. Mark and I are conferred, and we are not aware of any UAP records at NASA. Now look at this response. Response from Patty. Thank you, Daniel. Really? You haven't been gathering any existing records that might have relevance to UAP, even though you've conducted the public meeting of the study team on categorizing and evaluating data of UAP, ? I assumed you had been combing the agency for any pertinent information records. I'd still like to propose that we talk with you and Mark about what our activities in fact are and how they are being documented. Dan's response. Hi, Patty. Thank you for your follow-up. I appreciate the opportunity to provide further clarification on this matter. I would like to reaffirm that following a comprehensive review of our activities and discussions held during the public meeting on UAP, as well as the subsequent report, NASA currently does not hold or manage records classified specifically as UAP documents. The UAP Independent Study Team's report were aimed at outlining potential future steps for NASA in relation to understanding UAP in line with our strategic goals and scientific mission. The focus of the public meeting and the insights shared in the report emphasize potential avenues for NASA to contribute scientifically to the broader understanding of UAP, particularly through data analysis and leveraging our advanced sensing technologies. However, it's important to note that these discussions were exploratory in nature and have not yet resulted in the accumulation of UAP-specific records within NASA. In this context, our collaboration with other agencies, including the Department of Defense's AARO, is crucial. We are committed to supporting efforts to understand UAP within the whole of government approach, providing our expertise where it can be most effective. AARO is the government's custodian of UAP records per its NDAA mandate. Please be assured that should our future activities result in the generation or discovery of relevant records, we will communicate and collaborate closely with your office and other relevant stakeholders to ensure these are documented and managed appropriately. So just some interesting nuggets there in this document. And again, I would encourage you to have a look at them if you're interested. And unbeknownst to me, the Daily Mail picked up on that Foyer release and they reported on it just a few days ago. The truth about NASA's Go Fast UFO verdict exposed in secret internal emails. Well, they weren't quite secret. They were secured for release via Foyer. I'll read it for you. One of the Pentagon's most famous UAP... Actually, let me just zoom in on the size so it's a little easier on the eyes. There we go. Oh, crap. I've gone to the next article. My bad. Oops. Sorry, folks. Let me just go back. Let me just zoom out just a touch. There we go. Okay. So one of the Pentagon's most famous UFO videos are facing new scrutiny after secret NASA emails raised fresh questions about how it was analyzed. The Go Fast encounter recorded by Navy pilots tracking a fast-moving object off the Atlantic coast in 2015 was assessed by NASA as most likely showing an ordinary object drifting with the wind. But newly released documents obtained by UFO researcher Grant LeVac through the Freedom of Information Act revealed that NASA's 2023 review relied entirely on publicly available footage and did not include interviews with the Navy aviators who witnessed the encounter. NASA Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena panelist John Semiter, director of Boston University's Center for Space Physics, acknowledged the limitation in an internal email written weeks before the agency released its findings. No, our panel did not speak with the aviators, Semiter wrote. The analysis is based purely on information in the public release video. The correspondence also showed the panel did not have access to raw sensor data, instead relying on details visible within the footage itself. They noted that although the raw data were unavailable, the video display contained information such as camera elevation angle and aircraft altitude that analysts used in their calculations. Semiter added that mathematical modeling suggested the object was not traveling at unusually high speeds, but stressed the analysis did not determine what the object actually was, noting the available data were insufficient to identify its size, shape, material, or whether it had visible flight features. We cannot determine from the data whether this object is a metallic orb or has any flight surfaces, he continued. He also emphasized that while the calculations suggested the object was not moving at extraordinary velocity, this did not mean the Go Fast incident had yet been fully explained. And so many people like to put Go Fast to bed because NASA talked about it in their public meeting. In another internal exchange, one panel member suggested the group's detailed review of high-speed claims may have been limited to a single case, the GoFast itself, and acknowledged that even that analysis were not comprehensive. The GoFast UFO video was recorded in 2015 by a US Navy F-18 Super Hornet crew operating off the East Coast. The grainy black and white footage shows an object skimming low above the Atlantic Ocean, captured through a fighter's jet targeting display, as one pilot can be heard explaining, oh, got it. The Daily Mail has contacted NASA and SEMTA for comment. Internal emails suggest the panel's testing of high-speed UFO claims may have been narrower than publicly understood. David Spergel, president of the Simons Foundation and member of NASA's independent study team, UAP study team, wrote in August 21, 2023, in an August 21, 2023 message that the group appeared to have closely examined only a single case, the GoFast video, when evaluating claims of extreme speeds. I don't believe our panel reviewed more than a single case, GoFast by Josh, where the high velocity claim was brought into question, and even that review wasn't comprehensive, Spergel wrote. He added that the panel did not believe it had reviewed enough cases to justify broad conclusions about multiple high-speed UFO events, and the email correspondence that I just read to you. The correspondence also revealed internal debate over how strongly the panel should phrase its findings, with Spergel urging colleagues to avoid language suggesting that numerous high-velocity sightings had been disproven. Instead, he recommended revisiting the wording to emphasize that accurately determining distances is essential to understanding anomalous events, rather than implying that many such sightings had already been explained. In a February 2024 email, NASA Records officials contacted the independent study team to determine what UAP-related data had been collected, citing new federal requirements under the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act that mandate the tracking and management of unidentified anomalous phenomena records. And again, that was the email that I just read to you from Patty. Daniel Evans, the Assistant Deputy Associate Administrator for Research at NASA's Science Mission Directorate, wrote an email sent on February 9th, 2024, that we are not aware of any UAP records at NASA. The recipient, Patty Stockman, who worked as a management and program analyst for NASA's headquarters, questioned Evans' claim, responding, Daniel, really? You haven't been gathering any existing records that might have relevance to UAP, even though you've conducted the public meeting of the study team on categorizing, evaluating data of UAP, to which Evans sent a formal response. And we've kind of all read all this, but just to capture it in the article, I would like to reaffirm that following comprehensive review activities and the discussions held during the public meeting on UAP, as well as the subsequent report, NASA currently does not hold or manage records classified specifically as UAP documents. He added in a May 10, 2024 email to Stockman, the one incident that was in proximity to a NASA center was actually picked up by a DoD radar and hence is in their record. The internal exchanges are noted that NASA's UAP study team consisted of external experts rather than the agency staff, with them describing the panel as an independent scientific review body separate from NASA's own operational decision making. And that is the article. So again, good to see that, the Daily Mail, think of the Daily Mail what you will, you reported on those documents. I think it does shine a light on how NASA characterized its analysis of the GoFast, the contrast, and how it characterized its analysis of the GoFast case, and obviously the confusion over whether NASA had any records at all, and why was Sean Kirkpatrick engaging NASA for assistance. So there you go, folks. That's everything that I wanted to cover off on. We have gone over time, unfortunately, and I do want to obviously highlight any final questions that you guys have. So thank you, George, as always. Really appreciate you joining, and again, really am kind of taken back and appreciate all the sidebar comments and discussions and engagement you guys have in the chat. So please feel free to keep that coming in future shows. Let's just see if there's any more comments that have come through, because I do want to get to bed. And that's it, my friends. That is everything. So looks like a few of you want some new t-shirts to be designed. Never a straight answer. Yep. Or now, because they're a security agency, not now a security agency is the new one. So There you go, folks. I'm going to crack the back and get to bed. As always, really appreciate you spending your evening with me. I hope this live stream, this episode has been of interest, particularly to those of you that maybe don't follow me on X or don't follow, are not up to date with the press coverage that has been taking place over the course of this month to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Westall. So thank you for all for tuning in. Short Order Cook, thank you for joining in, my friend. Always good to see you in the chat. Until next time, my friends, look forward to seeing you on another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. So enjoy the rest of your week, your weekend, and look forward to seeing you on another episode in due course. So thanks again, and bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.